The metallic sound of Darth Vader's breathing echoed through the corridors of his ship, but his mind was far away. For the last few cycles, he had been plagued by strange visions, dreams in which a hooded figure muttered words about the Force, about absolute power and the manipulation of the Midi-Chlorians themselves. He saw decaying bodies, dark liquids bubbling in tanks, and eyes that watched him through time. When he woke up, he felt an unusual restlessness, as if the Force itself was calling him to revisit something that was left unfinished. The nightmares persisted, and the name of the one he had never met, but had always heard whispered through the corridors of the Empire, echoed in his mind. Plagueis. Show me what you wanted to hide so badly, Lord Plagueis. Vader muttered to himself in front of the void as he looked at the galactic maps. For some inexplicable reason, his instincts led him to an ancient planet full of mystery and darkness. Corbin, that world, where the wind shrieked among the forgotten tombs of the ancient Sith, seemed to whisper to him with the voice of the dead. Vader followed his instinct, setting off on a solitary journey without telling the Emperor. He knew he couldn't trust Palpatine. Something inside him began to suspect that there was more behind the story of the murdered former Sith Master. As he stepped onto the sands of Corbin, Vader felt a pressure in the air, as if each step attracted the invisible gazes of the former lords of the dark side. The tombs rose up like skeletal fingers pointing at the overcast sky, and as he approached the central chamber, a sensation hit him like a punch. There was ancient knowledge there, hidden by the force of time. The door, sealed with ancient inscriptions, yielded to the touch of the precisely channeled Force. Inside, the smell of rust and mildew mixed with a dark presence. He found black crystals, sketches, strange devices, and, in the center of the room, a holocron flickered red, waiting to be awakened. When he activated it, the image of an old Sith, with deep-set eyes and skin marked by time, appeared shrouded in scarlet light. It was Plagueis. The recording began to explain, in disturbing detail, how Plagueis himself had manipulated the Midi-Chlorians to create life, heal lethal wounds, and even expand the limits of consciousness within the Force. The key is intent combined with precise manipulation. Control the Midi-Chlorians and control death, said the cold voice of the former Sith Master. Vader remained motionless, absorbing every word, every formula, every symbol. Something inside him was beginning to awaken, a spark of hope, of transformation. "I don't need him anymore," Vader said quietly, referring to Palpatine. The holocron described an experimental procedure, something never completed by Plagueis, but with enough records to be replicated. The instructions required specific energy conduction sites, extreme concentration, and the mastery of skills that only a true chosen one would be able to use. Vader knew it was risky, but what did he have to lose? His pain was constant, his body a mechanical prison. What if there really was a chance to rebuild himself, to free himself from his limitations and perhaps rediscover the potential of the Chosen One? For days, Vader remained in Corbin, studying the notes, translating ancient symbols, and adapting the experiments to his own body. He dismantled parts of his armor, connected neurological control sensors directly to the Midi-Chlorians' manipulation instructions. "Pain is part of the transformation," said one of the records. Vader endured shocks, failures, recalibrations. The Force seemed to guide his steps, but it also tested his limits. With each attempt, he felt something change inside him, as if little sparks of light were rekindling under the darkness that had dominated him for so long. One night, while meditating inside the temple, Vader heard the voice in his dreams again. But this time, it wasn't just Plagueis. The distorted image of Padme appeared in the middle of the void, saying, "There is still light in you." He woke up panting. That had shaken him more than any previous experience. For a brief moment, the name Anakin echoed inside his mind, mingling with the warmth of long-buried memories. He could no longer ignore the call. Plagueis' knowledge wasn't just about power, it was about possibility, about reconstruction, about choice. At the end of the first phase of the experiments, Vader noticed that his internal wounds were beginning to react. Tissues that had previously been necrotic were showing signs of regeneration. His sensors identified changes in midi-chlorian density in specific areas of his body. It was a result that even Palpatine wouldn't have believed possible. He understood, then, why Plagueis had been killed. It represented a threat to the rule of fear, the Empire's true instrument of control. But Vader now saw another path, one that no longer depended on the mental slavery imposed by his master. If I continue, Vader thought silently, I won't just be cured, I'll be complete. Every day, his connection with the Force deepened, but in a different way than he had known. There was a strange balance growing inside him, as if light and shadow were part of the same flow. Confused him, but it also strengthened him. He was no longer just the Empire's enforcer. Now he was on the verge of something new, something greater, something that perhaps no Sith or Jedi before him had ever achieved. At the end of another session of forced meditation, Vader slowly stood up. His posture was firmer, and the weight of his armor seemed less. He looked at the Plagueis holocron one last time before sealing it again. Your legacy will be surpassed. With those words, Darth Vader left the Temple of Corbin. But inside him, a new identity was beginning to emerge. The next step was clear, to complete the process, and he knew exactly where it had to happen. Back on his ship, isolated in the depths of hyperspace, Darth Vader sealed himself inside his meditation chamber. There, protected from any outside interference, he was able to deepen the experiments he had begun on Corbin. The Plagueis schemes described a combination of chemical processes and highly specific electromagnetic impulses, designed to activate and multiply midi-chlorians. Inside his armor, he installed micro-containment chambers with rare compounds collected over the years in forgotten systems. When he activated them, he felt his flesh tingle, as if life was being sewn back together, cell by cell. The injections were made directly into the torso and the regions most affected by Mustafar's old injuries. A golden fluid flowed through the tubes connected to the inside of his armor, reacting with the life support systems. At the same time, variable electromagnetic fields ran through his body in alternating cycles, activating regions of his physiology that had previously been inert. The pain was almost unbearable, but Vader no longer cared. He knew that suffering was part of rebirth. And most of all, he couldn't be discovered. So he used his armor as a shield and laboratory, hiding each transformation from prying eyes. With each meditation cycle, Vader channeled the Force into himself like never before. He used ancient Sith mantras, aligned with the energy flow diagrams described by Plagueis, mixed with forgotten Jedi teachings that still lingered in his distant memory. The balance of these energies led him to heightened states of consciousness, almost out of time. During these meditations, he saw glimpses of himself, not as the machine, but as the man he had been. Each image of Padme, of his mother, of Ahsoka became more vivid. And at the same time, the shadow of the dark side whispered, "Go on, you will be complete." One day, at the end of a new Midi-Chlorian stimulation session, Vader noticed that the sensors built into his armor detected an unexpected regeneration. Previously burnt tissue showed advanced healing. Zones of lung necrosis showed reactivation. It was as if the Midi-Chlorians were not only responding to stimuli, but taking control of the process themselves. "That's it. They're multiplying," he muttered. A new pulse of energy ran down his spine, and for the first time in decades, he felt something akin to vitality. Aware that this could affect his internal circuits, Vader adjusted his armor to allow small windows of atmospheric breathing, beginning a process of lung readaptation. His voice began to change subtly, less robotic, with more human tones. He tested these changes cautiously, without drawing the attention of the Imperial systems. Every day, a new fragment of his old body showed signs of returning, but with it also came long-buried memories. And not just of pain, but of pride, of the desire for control, of anger. Emotions that had never ceased to exist, only lay dormant. In the intimacy of his chamber, Vader spoke to himself in a low voice. "They used me, all of them. The Jedi lied to me. Palpatine molded me for his purposes. Now, it's my way." The regeneration wasn't just physical. There was an energetic transformation taking place, and he knew he was no longer the same submissive man as before. The experiences of Plagueis, his own willpower, and the legacy of the Force were merging. A new being was emerging, and not even Vader knew what his final name would be. But one thing was clear: the Emperor's old servant was dying. During a night of deep meditation, his body collapsed. The pain was intense, and the sensors triggered critical alerts. But he didn't resist. He allowed the process to continue to the end. A beam of white light took his mind completely, and then silence. When he returned to consciousness, he realized that his left hand, once completely necrotic, now showed living flesh up to the elbow. His ribs on his right side were less compressed. And when his eyes saw the reflection in the glass of the chamber, they noticed something new. The red coloration had dissipated, giving way to Anakin Skywalker's original blue. The impact was immediate. He turned away from the glass, breathing hard. "What's happening to me?" he whispered, now in an almost human voice. It wasn't just his body. It was as if Anakin himself was trying to break through the walls of hatred that had held him hostage for so many years. But did that weaken him, or did it make him stronger? He didn't know. All he knew for sure was that he was alone in an irreversible process. And the closer he got to life, the more he felt the dark side regaining its place. As if that light, which was trying to emerge, needed a weight to balance it out. Over the next few days, Vader tested his connection with the Force. It was more intense, denser. He was able to move objects with his thoughts before he even wanted to. His perception was more acute. He could feel emotions in distant systems, predict the movements of the Imperial Council without leaving the ship. But he was also becoming more impatient, more dominated by impulses to control. The dark side was calling him again, but now no longer as a servant, but as a master. It was he who dictated the rules of his own transformation. But what would come of it? A new Sith? A Jedi reborn? Something as yet unnamed? Finally, after weeks of experiments, Vader removed part of his mask for the first time without medical assistance. The air penetrated his regenerated lungs, and he didn't cough. He looked at the reflection in the metal wall, and there he was. No longer the mechanical monster. For the first time in decades, his own eyes met the face that had once been called Anakin Skywalker. The marks were still there, the scars of war, of lava, of pain. But the skin lived on. He reached out, touching his own face in silence. Something had been reborn. And with that rebirth, a new path was opening up, a path that would lead him back to the man he had been, or perhaps to something beyond. The regeneration was complete. The process initiated by Plagueis notes had had an effect that not even Vader had foreseen. His body had been completely rebuilt. Previously deformed bones were restored, necrotic tissues now pulsed with vitality, and his breathing was deep and free, without the aid of tubes or machines. But the most surprising thing was his connection with the Force. Not only had he returned to the level he had possessed before becoming Darth Vader, now he had surpassed any known limit. It was as if the Midi-Chlorians had found in the Chosen One the ideal breeding ground. In this new state of power, Anakin Skywalker, for that was how he was beginning to see himself, began to feel distant vibrations in the Force, like invisible threads linking him to the past. During a meditation, he clearly saw the image of an old Jedi, kneeling in an arid cave, surrounded by familiar rocks and hot winds. "Obi-Wan," he whispered. The scenery was unmistakable. Tatooine. The dunes, the colors of the sky, the way the wind behaved, everything indicated that his old master was on that remote planet. The Force was guiding him, and now there was nothing to stop him from going there. Meanwhile, at the center of the Empire, Palpatine's throne remained shrouded in silence. The Emperor began to notice something strange. The absence of communications from Vader, the monitoring signals from his loyal apprentice's armor, which had been deactivated, and a void in the Force that he couldn't identify. All this made him uneasy. He's different. Something has changed. Palpatine knew that, if his instincts were right, he could be facing a problem that not even he, with all his tricks, would be able to contain. "I need to find him before it's too late," On a quiet afternoon on Tatooine, Obi-Wan Kenobi was in deep meditation. Sitting on the floor of a silent cave, he sought connection with the Force in order to remain vigilant and balanced. Suddenly, a disturbance shot through his perception like a bolt of lightning. It was as if a storm of power was approaching. He stood up quickly, eyes fixed on the cave entrance. A figure appeared, walking with firm steps. He was a tall man in a dark tunic, and an intense presence surrounded him. When the light touched him, Obi-Wan shuddered. "Anakin?" he whispered in disbelief. The man stopped in front of him, his gaze serious, firm, powerful. His hair was cut short, his face was more mature, and his eyes were no longer the same furious eyes as Mustafar's. But they weren't redeeming eyes either. But they weren't eyes of redemption either. "No, it's not possible. You died that day. What happened to you?" said Obi-Wan, still shocked. Anakin crossed his arms, watching his former master calmly. "It seems that the path of the Chosen One is not yet over." The silence settled for a moment, heavy. Obi-Wan didn't know whether to raise his saber or surrender to that power. "You've fallen to the dark side, Anakin. Killed. Betrayed. You've lost yourself," said Obi-Wan, his voice low but firm. Anakin didn't look away. "I recognize what I've done, but I didn't come to ask for forgiveness." His words were spoken clearly, without rancor or emotion. "The Force has shown me that there is still purpose in me, and maybe it starts here." Obi-Wan tried to understand what was in front of him. The presence was not that of a Sith nor a Jedi. It was a vortex of balance still stabilizing. "You're not Vader anymore, but you're not the boy I trained either." Anakin nodded slightly. "Maybe I'm something that never existed before." During a moment of silence, Anakin closed his eyes. A subtle, ancient energy began to shine within him. It was unlike anything he had ever felt. "Obi-Wan, there's something here. Something that pulses with the Force, that calls to me with an absurd intensity." He pointed towards the desert, where the Force seemed to vibrate with warmth and life. "What is it?" Obi-Wan was silent for a moment, reluctant to answer, but there was no hiding it any longer. "It's your old home, Shmi's home, but that's not what's calling you." He paused and regarded Anakin with regret. "It's Luke, your son." Anakin stood still. It was as if time had frozen. "Luke," he repeated, almost voicelessly. "You kept him hidden." Obi-Wan nodded slowly. "It was the only way to protect him. From you, and from the Emperor." The wind blew between them, as if the Force was testing their reactions. "The Force pulses in him, and now that you're back, now you can feel it." Anakin took a few steps back, absorbing the revelation. "My blood, my legacy, and hers too." Obi-Wan knew he was referring to Padme. His thoughts flitted between the past and the future. What was left of him now had a name, and it was there on Tatooine, living under both suns. "He doesn't know about me?" asked Anakin with a restrained tone. "No, he's still very young, but he's strong, Anakin, very strong, and he'll need guidance. I just don't know if you're the right person for it," replied Obi-Wan sincerely. Anakin didn't reply immediately. He just looked at the horizon where the desert met the sky. The doubt in his heart was real, but the desire to correct his own history was even stronger. Maybe this is the chance to do something different. Obi-Wan took a deep, cautious breath. "And Palpatine? He won't stand idly by." Anakin turned back to his master. His eyes now held the serenity of someone who had made a choice. "He will sense my absence, and he will come after me. But this time he won't find his servant. He'll find the man he tried to destroy." Obi-Wan remained silent, watching the man he had once called brother. The Force enveloped them as never before, not in conflict, but in something close to understanding. The winds of fate were blowing again, and the game was far from over. Palpatine's unease was growing by the day. Vader's absence was no longer just an administrative anomaly, but a hole in the Force that he couldn't ignore. He scoured the records, traced the coordinates of Vader's ship's last location and noticed patterns that led him to an uncomfortable conclusion. Corbin had been visited. Plagueis' presence still echoed on the planet, like a cry muffled in time. When he realized what this could mean, his eyes flashed with hatred. "You dare betray your origin, my apprentice?" he muttered contemptuously, before boarding his ship in the direction of Tatooine. Obi-Wan felt the disturbance before he even left the cave. The Force seemed twisted, denser, as if an ancient, poisonous presence was approaching. He hurried across the dunes, keeping a watchful eye. When he approached the spot, he found a hooded man standing among the shadows of the rocks. His dark cloak swayed in the hot desert wind. "Kenobi," said Palpatine with a cold smile. Obi-Wan didn't answer, but only activated his saber, in a defensive position. The duel was inevitable. The clash was fierce and silent. Rays and blue light cut through the air amidst the hot desert rocks. Palpatine was faster and more aggressive than Obi-Wan remembered. Time had taken his youth, but not his skill. Obi-Wan tried to hold his ground, channeling the Force with precision, but the difference in power was obvious. Anakin's regeneration had awakened something in the Emperor, something ancient and cruel. In a moment of distraction, Palpatine struck him with a direct bolt to the chest, throwing him against the stone. Obi-Wan fell to his knees, panting, trying to rise. "You have failed, as always," said Palpatine, before delivering the final blow. Obi-Wan's body fell to the sand, lifeless. The Force was silent all around, as if mourning the fall of one of its most faithful servants. Palpatine extinguished his saber and walked slowly to the entrance of the house, where Luke watched him with frightened eyes. The Emperor held out his hand and the boy, confused, had no time to react. With a simple gesture, Palpatine wrapped him in a containment field and took him to his ship. "The blood of the chosen one. Now he will be mine." The ship took off into the golden clouds of Tatooine, carrying the last hope of the Jedi and the heir of Anakin Skywalker. The vibration of the Force was unbearable. Anakin felt the imbalance as soon as Obi-Wan fell. It was like a hole had opened up in the fabric of the universe. He ran through the dunes, guided by that intense, dark energy, until he found the empty house. Remains of burnt fabric on the floor, battle marks, and the echo of pain in the Force confirmed what he had feared. "Kenobi," he muttered, clenching his fists. As he extended his perception, he felt another presence, alive but confused. It was Luke, and next to him, like a suffocating shadow, was Palpatine. Without hesitation, Anakin leapt into the atmosphere, deftly piloting his own ship towards the planet's orbit. The energy trails of the Imperial transport left an obvious trail. Before long, he reached the Emperor's shadowy frigate, positioned above Tatooine like a vulture hovering over carrion. As he infiltrated, no guard could stop him. His presence was so dominant that the corridors seemed to open up at his will. The encounter was inevitable. The door to the main chamber slowly opened, revealing Palpatine on a metal throne, with Luke standing beside him, confused and frightened. "So you're back," said Palpatine with contempt. "The traitor who dares to break the shackles I gave you." Anakin fell silent, his eyes fixed on the old master. With a calm gesture, he removed his helmet. The regenerated face of Anakin Skywalker appeared before the Emperor and his own son. Palpatine, seeing Anakin's gaze on his son, let out a dry laugh. Pathetic. Jedi sentimentality. The duel began violently. Sith rays cut through the air, while Anakin responded with a mastery of the Force that surpassed anything Palpatine had ever seen. Sabers clashed with intensity, and with each movement, the ship seemed to tremble. Luke watched, not knowing what to do. The old Emperor launched himself furiously, trying to regain control, but Anakin was something else now. Faster, more connected to the Force, more determined. With every blow, he was not only fighting Palpatine, but everything he stood for in his life. Control, lies, slavery. "You've turned me into a monster," Anakin shouted during the fight. "And now, you will see what this monster has become." Palpatine tried to use the lightning once again, launching waves of energy at Anakin. But now, he wasn't just resisting, he was absorbing. His raised arms channeled the energy through the restructured Midi-Chlorians, and in a final cry of power, he returned the amplified discharge. The impact hit the Emperor with full force, throwing him against the columns of the room. When he fell to the ground, he was motionless. Luke approached slowly, looking at Palpatine's body and then at the man in front of him. Luke stared, perplexed. "Who are you?" Anakin looked away for a moment, but kept his posture firm. "I'm your father." For a moment, silence reigned between them. There was surprise and doubt, but there was also connection. The Force flowed between them like a bond long lost and now rediscovered. Anakin held out his hand to his son. "Let's get out of here. A new path begins now." Sometime later, Anakin temporarily took command of the Empire. But unlike Palpatine, he didn't seek more power. He gathered together the surviving senators, dissolved military control of the outer regions, and convened a new galactic assembly. In a speech broadcast to all systems, he declared the end of the Age of Fear. The galaxy belongs to everyone, and no one will ever again rule through darkness. He handed over control to the restored Senate, restoring political balance to the galaxy. The people, still fearful, saw not a dictator but a man marked by redemption. During the ceremony, Bail Organa approached Anakin with a serious expression. "There's something you need to know, Leia. She's your daughter too." Anakin froze. For a moment, he didn't seem to understand. "Leia?" Bail nodded. "She's Luke's twin sister. I raised her as my own, to protect her. But she has the same blood as Luke. The same light." Anakin sat in silence for long minutes. Then, with a restrained smile, he raised his eyes to the horizon. "So there's more to rebuild than I imagined." From that day on, Anakin took on the role of guardian to his two sons. Luke trained with him in the silent hills of a neutral planet, learning to wield his saber and listen to the Force in his heart. Leia, for her part, showed a natural aptitude for politics, following in Bail's footsteps. At a young age, she already spoke with clarity and firmness, with a presence that silenced her elders. Under Anakin's gaze, the two of them grew into symbols of a new era, balancing light and responsibility. In the quiet moments, Anakin still meditated. He saw faces from the past of Qui-Gon Jinn, of Padme, of Obi-Wan. There was no more guilt, only understanding. The path he had traveled had been tragic, but something new had emerged from it. The Force had not abandoned him, only tested him. And now it was guiding the steps of the children he had once almost lost. It was a new time, and the Chosen One was finally fulfilling his true destiny.